Hello my viewers and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so that whenever I post a video, you will be notified about it. Give this video a thumbs up by tapping on the like button and feel free to be part of the conversation by sharing your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now I will come into this thought-provoking video where we take a look into the complex and often controversial discussion about the identity of Black Americans. Now featuring perspectives from various voices, we explore the assertion that Black Americans, due to their unique historical and cultural experiences, may be considered the original inhabitants of America. Now, a palm color commenter highlights how the African American experience is unparalleled globally, suggesting that their identity is profoundly American, lacking ties to specific African nations. Meanwhile, Black Americans voice frustration over being continually linked to Africa. Not all Black Americans come from Africa or have roots in Africa, arguing for a recognition of their deep historical roots in America. So join me as we examine these compelling viewpoints and challenge conventional narratives about identity and heritage. Take a look at the videos. I will be right back.
And especially the African American experience, it's literally not duplicated anywhere on earth in history. African Americans are a completely unique phenomenon as a people. Who they are culturally, what their history is, what their experience is, isn't duplicated anywhere on earth. You don't know where you came from. You don't know what country you came from. You don't know what culture you came from. You don't know what language you came from. You don't know what your religion was before. You, like I've said before, you're more American than anyone because you don't have any other identity. Actually, your entire identity is American-based. That's not the case of anyone else. I'm Irish American. I'm German American. I'm Italian American. I'm Jewish American. I'm this or that, the other. You can say African American, but you don't know anything about Africa. You don't even know which part of Africa. Africans don't call themselves that because I know my tribe. I have my language. I have my region, my country, my whatever. Like me saying European American. I'm not European. I'm specifically Irish and German. But you can't say that. You are American. You're the original Americans. You know? Everyone else is immigrants. You can't even be called immigrants. Yeah. You know? You're originally American. And your culture is as close to being the indigenous culture of America as there can be without you being the indigenous people. You know? You're the indigenous people of the entity called America. Called the United States of America. Everything else came from elsewhere. Your culture is the only one that came from right there. Because you were cut off from everything else. You know? There's nobody else like that. There's nobody else like that in the world. There's no other culture like that in the world.
You know what? I'm sick of y'all telling us that we from Africa. I'm really sick and tired. I keep bringing up these receipts of Native American indigenous hair texture right here. Check it out. You can say we from Africa all you want, but the truth is we was living in America. You understand?
Yeah, all right. I don't even know why I asked that. I knew you didn't know.
So if you're Black American and your family passes down an oral history of you all being connected to an indigenous nation or community, it shouldn't always be dismissed. Now, there are basically 4 groups of people who might say this, and 2 of them are likely to be more false than true. Like, we have people who have a lot of internalized anti-Blackness and just glorify being mixed race. And of course, we have a lot of people who believe in a pseudo-history that prior to colonization, the real indigenous Americans were somehow racially Black or African. But 2 other groups of people who say this are probably right. Now, the first group that's obviously true are Afro-Natives with clear and contemporary tribal identification. And the last group, which is very interesting and most relevant to this video, are the Black families whose Native American identity has been institutionally erased and only passed down through storytelling. From the early periods of colonization, African-descended peoples and indigenous Americans have been heavily interconnected. Some Native people were enslaved alongside Africans, some Native tribes owned African slaves, and some Africans who escaped slavery would go on to live and integrate with Native Americans, and so on and so forth. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the US government and several nations set up strict regulations on how people could identify racially and tribally. And a lot of these provisions excluded mixed race and Black but culturally Native people from identifying with their indigenous heritage. In some cases, the process was so corrupt that it allowed some straight up descended from colonizer white people to pay government agents to be classified as Native American and receive land allotments. In general, the relationship between Black and Indigenous people in United States history has been severely under-researched and under-discussed. So instead of just laughing it off or dismissing it immediately as fiction, a statement like this from a family member might warrant some further digging.
Those of you who are still asleep, nobody on this earth has been named after 2 continents. Africans don't even call themselves Africans. They call themselves Ghanaians, Nigerians, Eritreans, Ethiopians, okay? Do you get it? And for those of you who say, oh, well, why would the government do anything like that? Like, why would they cut anybody off from who they are? Like, they would never do anything like that. They're too busy. That's because you're still caught up in the matrix. You're still asleep. And you don't realize the truth, true history about what those entities have done to my people in America. And not just my people in America, to people all over the world, to whom they've given reparations that they've committed infractions against, except for my people in America. And there's a reason for that.
So let's talk about America real quick. And this is the country that I live in. And when people talk about making America great, I still wonder what time they're talking about. Wasn't exactly great for the people of my color. Wasn't exactly great for the original people that were here. So when Americans talk about illegal immigrants, they don't realize that this country was founded by illegal immigrants. It's not like you got your immigration papers signed by the Native Americans, right? That didn't happen. So, and this is a high level deal, the devil's in the details, but let's just distill down the history of this country roughly, right? So the founding fathers leave a situation of oppression, seeking for freedom, so on and so forth, come to America and discover a land that already has people, right? And on top of that, shortly after they arrived to seek freedom and talk about this freedom and liberty, they import slaves and use slave labor to help build a lot of the things that we see now. So America's history is not one of freedom and liberty and things of that nature. Even when you look at the Declaration of Independence, 1776, all men were created equal. Well, they weren't really considering men that were colored, right? Now, fast forward to now, and you have people talking about immigration and like they actually have the right to choose who comes and who doesn't. And I get this is a complex issue, but let's not come at it from a sense of morality when we can all look at the history of this country. With all that being said, we have the opportunity to make a new future, but we have to be able to be honest with the history of this country. And it wasn't all good, and there's a lot of oppression. There's a lot of things that happened that weren't cool, and history is trying to whitewash that stuff along with a lot of other things because there's a lot of reasons behind that. But I just kind of wanted to say that because it's interesting to hear people talk about immigration and make America great again. And I'm not on one side or the other. I think politics is like wrestling, and these entities that are these actors, right, that play these roles in politics are really just acting on behalf of the people that give them money and the corporations and things like that. So you can follow the money and you can see a lot of the people donate to both sides, and those are the ones that really benefit from what's going on. So you can have someone in office and out of office, but it still doesn't matter because certain agendas still happen. The rich still get richer, the poor still get poorer. That happens regardless of who's in office, right? And these corporations are still going to make money and still do the things that they do. So they can hire politicians to do their bidding for them, and that's the system that we have. You know, it's still legal. It's still something that isn't illegal to do. You have lobbyists, which is pretty much legal bribery and all these things in our system. So America is corrupt, and we know this, but we don't know how corrupt it is because we're fed all this propaganda from the inside. So that's the current situation. That doesn't mean we have to propagate this further. That doesn't mean we have to have a civil war. That doesn't mean we have to implode. But we have to recognize our history and our past and decide that that's not how we want to move into the future. And once we're able to do that, we can start having constructive conversations and not just peddle these ideologies that are based on falsehoods, unless you want to really be real and talk about how we really got here. Just my 2 cents.
Now, when it comes to the terms African American and Black American, the terms are not necessarily synonymous. It can come down to individual preferences about how people wish to identify themselves. Now, Black and African American have replaced older terms such as colored and the racial slur that were imposed by others. Self-identification might be influenced by a long history of colonialism, enslavement, imposed racial categories, and cultural imposition. Now, a question might come to say, why do some people prefer to identify as Black American and others as African American? Well, the reasons vary, and some people may identify as Black because they do not feel connected to the American state. Others may identify as Black because they do not identify with the African continent. Now, there are various historical, social, and political reasons why one might identify as Black rather than African American. Also, the term Black has historically connected people of African descent around the world. Now, why some certain people would prefer African American is because the term arose as an alternative to Black for its similarity to hyphenated names for other African groups. Some people may identify themselves as African American to resist Black as a socially constructed category. Others, however, may identify as African American to assert their American identity. Now, there are a multitude of reasons one might identify as African American. Now, the debate over identity labels has sparked numerous conversations within the Black American community. While some individuals proudly claim the term African American, others prefer Black American or simply American. Now, the reasoning behind these preferences, just like I have said, varies, but a common thread is the desire to acknowledge and honor one's heritage. For some, the term African American serves as a powerful reminder of their ancestral roots and the rich cultural traditions that originated on the African continent. However, others feel disconnected from Africa, citing a lack of personal experience, cultural familiarity, or historical ties. Now, this disconnection is particularly understandable for Black Americans who were born and raised in the United States. Growing up in America, they have developed their own unique culture shaped by the complexities of the African diaspora, European influences, and indigenous traditions. This distinct cultural identity is neither African nor European, but distinctly American. In fact, many Black Americans have created their own cultural practices, customs, and traditions that reflect their experiences, struggles, and triumphs in the United States. From music and art to cuisine and language, Black American culture is a vibrant, dynamic, and ever-evolving entity that deserves recognition and respect. The preference for Black American or simply American may also stem from a desire to assert one's identity as a native-born citizen, unencumbered by the complexities of ancestral origins. After all, many Black Americans have been in the United States for generations, contributing to the country's growth, progress, and diversity. I feel the choice of identity label is a personal one, influenced by individual experiences, perspectives, and values. Rather than imposing a single label on an entire community, I feel people should respect and celebrate the diversity of identities within the Black American experience. By acknowledging and honoring these differences, I feel they can work towards a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of Black American identity, one that recognizes that complex interplay of African, European, and Indigenous influences, as well as the unique cultural traditions that have emerged in the United States. Now, I also want to talk about a profound observation which was made by a sister, highlighting a crucial aspect of identity and labeling. Now, she noted that Africans don't refer to themselves as Africans in the way that Black Americans are often labeled. Instead, they identify themselves by their country of origin, such as Nigerian, Ghanaian, or Kenyan. Now, this distinction is significant because it underscores the importance of specificity and accuracy when describing one's identity. By using country-specific names, I feel we as Africans are able to assert our unique cultural, linguistic, and national identities. In contrast, the term African can be overly broad, encompassing a vast array of cultures, languages, and experiences. Now, the sister's comment about nobody being named after two continents is also a powerful critique of the African American label. It highlights the peculiar nature of this term, which seems to imply a dual identity that is both African and American. While this label may have been intended to acknowledge the ancestral origins of Black Americans, it can also be seen as a form of cultural erasure, ignoring the complex historical and cultural contexts that have shaped Black American identity. Now, a poignant reality check was shared by a palm-colored man who highlighted the disconnect between some Black Americans and their ancestral origins in Africa. Like, he pointed out that many people don't even know which part or country of Africa they come from. Now, this lack of knowledge is not surprising given the historical legacy of slavery, colonization, and cultural erasure that has sought to sever the connections between Black Americans and their African roots. But here's the thing, if you don't know where you come from in Africa, how can you genuinely claim to be African? This is not to say that Black Americans can't have a deep connection to African culture, history, and identity. However, I feel it's essential to acknowledge the complexities of identity and the limitations of our knowledge. For those who were born in America, their experiences, culture, and identity are shaped by the American context, not the African one. They may have African ancestry, but their daily lives, traditions, and customs are distinctly American. So why insist on calling oneself African when you don't know which part of Africa you come from? Now, this commentary is not meant to diminish the importance of African heritage or the connections that Black Americans may feel to Africa. Rather, it's a call to honesty and self-awareness. People need to acknowledge the complexities of different identities and the historical forces that have shaped them. I feel those who want to be referred as Black Americans should be referred to that, and those who still want to be referred as African Americans should be called that. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do my viewers have to say? Share your thoughts, your views as well in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video as I bring you another interesting video.